of the UK's Brexit movement. And yeah, he had a lot to say about Donald Trump and the transition team. Joining me now is Ben Ferguson, a CNN political commentator. Ron Brownstein is here, CNN senior political analyst and senior editor for The Atlantic. And Josh Rogan, a CNN political analyst and columnist for The Washington Post. Okay, so I had this lengthy interview with Nigel Farage, and I know all of you were listening. So Ben, what stuck out in your mind?
I think there's definitely some lobbying going on for him to get this position and be able to work with Donald Trump and to have I think, better communication and better understanding between these two countries. The big question is this a smart move politically? Because there's going to be a lot of people in Parliament that are not going to like this and are not going to like feeling that they're being pressured by Donald Trump or Nigel, who both of them are lightning rods in their own countries, and they're probably going to fight back, I think, maybe even harder against us because of the fact that this has become such a public conversation. So, will they be able to use the media to their advantage? I don't know. It'll be an interesting conversation to see where this one goes.
Yes, it will, because I did get the distinct impression that Nigel Farage wants to be the UK ambassador to Washington.
Yeah.
Do you?
Carol.
Go ahead, Ron.
Look, but look, the people have to understand who Nigel Farage is. The UKIP party, and I have been to their headquarters in London, is widely considered an extremist party in the British system. It is widely accused of racism and xenophobia. Its campaign against Brexit was extremely polarizing and divisive, and it is so on the edge of British politics that today, out of the 650-member House of Commons, it has one seat out of 650. The idea of the Tory government appointing Nigel Farage as ambassador to the U.S. or kind of taking him into their council is absurd. I mean, this is someone who is on the edge of British politics in many ways. And for him to say that he has never heard Steve Bannon say anything extreme, from where he stands, that may well be true. But he stands in a very different place than I think most Americans would be comfortable with.
Well, I did find it interesting that he is well, I mean, he knows Steve Bannon so well and talked to him throughout the primary campaign, Josh.
Well, that's not an accident, and I agree with everything Ron said, but I would just add that this is part of a comprehensive strategy by Bannon to align the Trump administration with a series of far-right extremist populist parties throughout Europe, okay? Marine Le Pen, who is running for president of France for the National Front Party, another right-wing populist extremist party, said that Steve Bannon talked to her before he talked to the French government, okay? So what we're seeing is sort of a not-so-covert effort to realign American foreign policy with all of these parties who are engaged in an anti-European project, right? Probably funded with Russian money. Okay, that's a real thing.
Now
and
we're
that's
getting extreme. Russian money?
No.
Come on.
Yeah, it's in the Panama Papers. Check it out. Google it, and it's in there. Okay.
You're saying that Brexit was it? Hold on, wait. Let's be clear. You're saying that Brexit and what happened there with actual people in Britain who said they wanted to exit. You're saying we're duped by Russian money being funneled in and had nothing to do with their own ideas in the UK?
Now, I love watching you come to the realization of the truth of the situation. Aaron Banks.
It's so far from the truth. It's absurdity. Even on Thanksgiving, I'm shocked.
I encourage viewers to Google it. Aaron Banks, the guy who comes with Nigel Farage to all of these meetings with Trump, who we never talk about. Look into his Panama Papers. Look into his finances.
Okay, we'll put that aside because I don't know the CNN reporting on this, so we'll put that aside for a moment.
Put that aside.
Back to the relationship between Britain and the United States, and I'll pose this question to Ron, because Donald Trump is engaging with Nigel Farage ahead of the British Prime Minister, which is kind of strange, right? Because you want to continue to have a strong relationship with Britain. So how will that play out in the long run, Ron?
Well, Josh's point, I think, is very important here. I mean, both before entering government, certainly before entering government, Steve Bannon has talked about kind of building a confederation of these populist nationalist parties that have a common kind of agenda of an insular nationalism, hostile to immigration, hostile to globalization, hostile to trade, and hostile in many ways to kind of the traditional international alliances that the U.S. foreign policy has kind of been built around since World War II. So it is an open question not only with Britain, but across Europe. I think, what will this this ultimately mean? There's in the AfD party in Germany. Almost all of the European countries now have these parties that are still mostly on the fringe, as UKIP is in England. The question is whether active or tacit support from the Trump administration would allow these parties to gain a more mainstream foothold in countries across Europe. And I think that has to make a lot of people on both sides of the Atlantic very nervous.
It's also an issue of how do we want to conduct our foreign.
Hold on, let me jump in here.
Do we want to have diplomacy?
Wait, let Ben have a word in edgewise, and then I want to get to national security. So go ahead, Ben.
Carol, there is not a lot of nervousness here. This is a complete misunderstanding of what Nigel was about and what Donald Trump was about, and people still seem to not understand this. What they both have in common is they said to the people in their country, if you want to have your country first, and you think that your country is not getting good deals on an international platform, and if you think that we're giving up too much and we're not fighting for the American worker or in the UK, for the people in the UK, then it's time for these people in power to listen to us. And they were both able to win. The idea that everyone is terrified or scared is not true. Otherwise, they would not have done so well. They're both revolutionaries here. They're both people that said we're going to go back and fight for our interests as a nation first and foremost. And especially, I think, on Thanksgiving, that's a point that a lot of people can kind of look back on and realize how big of a movement this was. This is not about all this extremism. It's about a simple issue is it time to put our countries first? And I think that's why Trump and Nigel would work well together, is because they both understand they care about their country more than any other country out there. And there's nothing wrong with it.
I do want to focus on national security and these security briefings, right? Was for these security briefings, and he's only attended 2 of them. Mike Pence, by the way, has attended all of them. Is that reason for concern?
I think it is for 2 reasons. One, it's, we know that the Trump administration is busy, okay? And Donald Trump has been having meetings with national security leaders, choosing his national security cabinet. So it's not like he's uninterested. On the other hand, he's taking these briefings at a lower rate than his predecessors, all right? He has a higher hill to climb because he doesn't have any experience in this stuff. And he's made, throughout the campaign, several statements downplaying the value and veracity of these briefings. He actually called the intelligence officers out for not giving him their honest opinions based on basically nothing. So there's a lot of skepticism in the intelligence community that Donald Trump is going to respect their analysis, take it seriously, use it to make decisions that are important to protecting America. And this just feeds that narrative, okay? He's got to build a bridge to the professionals who are he's going to have to depend on to make these decisions.
And American troops at the moment, Ron, are actively engaged.
Yeah. Well, look, yeah, absolutely. And, look, the breach between Donald Trump and the Republican foreign policy establishment was greater than on the domestic side, where you had these letters, these incredible letters signed by 50 former top national security officials saying they did not believe he was qualified to be commander-in-chief. So there's more bridge building to be done. Can I just real quick, though, to Ben's point, it is true that all of these nationalist movements have part of their case, a big part of the case is against kind of global elites and global cooperation, but it is willful blindness to ignore that all of them also have a significant component that is aimed against racial minorities in their own country. It's a bifurcated message attacking threats above and below, and to kind of whitewash the role of racial animosity in all of these movements. And also, I think it is important to understand that, from the point of view of international cooperation. No. Right. No, I'm just saying.
You've overplayed it. You've overplayed it, and the election's over. You can stop fear-mongering.
It is part, I mean, it is part of the agenda. It is part of the reality of all of these movements, and it does have policy implications that go well beyond an election. And the other point worth mentioning is that whether or not these movements are fundamentally, whether Russia, how much Russia is involved in any of them, ultimately, all of these movements do call into question kind of the traditional international alliances that the U.S. and Europe have relied on since World War II, and in that sense, they are unquestionably welcomed by interests in Russia as a way of kind of dissolving some of the bonds that held Europe and the Atlantic Alliance together.
Okay, Ben, last word, then I got to go.
A week ago, all these detractors of Donald Trump were saying that Donald Trump's transition was a disaster. He's ahead of schedule where Barack Obama was with appointing people to his cabinet positions ahead of him when most of his came December the 1st. Now you're having people that are angry that Donald Trump is not taking as many of these national security briefings. Why? Because he's actually actually setting up a government, which they claimed a week ago he was not doing a good enough job at. You cannot have it both ways. All I care about is that Donald Trump is up to speed on national security issues the day before he's sworn in, and I think there's plenty of time between now and January the 20th. He's got to set up a government so that he can respond to national security issues and issues of war. That is more important than the briefing at this moment in time. I think he's saying, I care about finding the right people first, then I'll have everything in place.
He's got to walk and chew gum at the same time.
I got to leave it there.
He's doing a lot more than that.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I'm glad you all are not having Thanksgiving at the same table, but, but I'm glad you were here with me this morning. Still to come in the newsroom, we're going to go outside. It's a Thanksgiving Day tradition for millions of Americans, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.